And we're live on YouTube. Hello, friends. So we are starting office hours today and just waiting for YouTube, the YouTube link to finally show up. There it is. And I am going to share my screen. Moving this over here, pasting the YouTube link. So if you've never been to office hours before, you're in for a treat, hopefully, maybe. So office hours is your opportunity to ask me questions. And so throughout the week, I get questions from folks and I just tell them, please bring it to office hours so I can answer all the questions at once. It just makes things a lot easier for me. And it makes it so that I can give you better answers. And so you're more than welcome to join me in the Zoom call if you like. The Zoom link is posted in here. And you can also just watch on YouTube if you want and listen to answers to other people's questions. You can find all of the links and everything at kinseydots.com/office hours. And yeah, I give priority to people who are in the Zoom call, but I also go through the Discord. So let's get started. Where we left off was, yeah, I think this is the last one. So Raul is asking, I've purchased the course, guessing, I'm not sure which course they're referring to because they haven't connected their account. So one course, hopefully. Migrating Mocha, okay, probably the testing JavaScript. Migrating Mocha test over to Jest alongside React testing library. I was wondering if there's any content or help you can provide to help with running these two parallel in the code base is very large. And need to incrementally change the test over my main issue with the expect, I'm guessing expect from Chai and Jest are different. Of course, so my Jest test throws errors. Okay. So here, and let me just mention answering this on the stream now. So with both Mocha and Jest, you have the ability to tell them which files are test files. So I haven't used Mocha in a long time, but I know that Jest has a configuration option for test match. So this configuration option allows you to specify what kinds or what file names to consider tests. And so by default, anything in a dunder test directory like this, and anything with a .spec or .test like this, so it's like foo.test.js or TS or TSX, or even I think JSX, or with a spec instead of tests, or a test directory, and any of those files. Those are considered tests, but that's just the default. You can totally change it, and you can make it be something like, foo.jest.tsx or something like that if you wanted to. And so if you do that, then Mocha won't consider it a test, only Jest will, and then you can migrate just by changing the file name. So that's what I would recommend. So good luck with that. I will paste a link to this right there. And yeah, good luck. Okay, this is a really common thing. So it's a solved problem. I am not sure how to pronounce this, but I will do my best, and you can feel free to correct me. It's Sheruyot. Okay, sorry. Okay, I was thinking of this approach where rather than use callback to have referential equality. Sorry, by the way, I forgot to mention that I'm recovering from a really bad cold, not COVID. And so my throat is sore and I've got mucus and stuff, and I really apologize. I know it's gross. It's, yeah, living as a human, I guess. Referential equality for a function used inside useEffect passed to children. What if we move the function declaration outside the component and pass the set state as callbacks to the function? Would this approach make sense, or are there potential drawbacks? Okay, yeah, so API requests, you got path and set some value. You do the thing and set some value. And then here you have your use state, you have a useEffect, API request, yada, yada. Yeah, you could totally do that. So first of all, I would say that I don't see any benefit to having this function at all. You could just take the contents of the function and put it right here. and then you still don't need to worry about dependencies and stuff like that. The situation may be that this function needs to be reused in a lot of different situations, and so it does need to be in a function. And so if that's the case, then what you're doing here is actually fine for the most part, because at least you can track where, oh, they're calling, they can re-render for me. I typically am not a huge fan of this, but at least you're explicitly passing the setter. And so you can see, oh, okay, so this function can lead to this component re-rendering. I just don't like the mechanism for re-rendering being far away from the component. We had a lot of problems with this in AngularJS apps where you'd pass a scope property somewhere and then it could get set who knows where and trigger re-renders. That was a lot worse than what this is. But yeah, still not my favorite pattern. But what I can say is that this is one of the patterns that I teach in Epic React. So, or it's similar. So it's the, let's see, Advanced React Patterns. And there's the GitHub repo that you can take a look at as well. So I will copy both, or actually let's copy the specific one, context module functions. And if we go to source exercise 01MD, this is the markdown for that. And actually maybe more helpful final. Actually, there are a couple extra credits. We'll give you, oh no, just kidding. There's no extra credit. There we go. So yeah, those will maybe be helpful, but basically we have this update user function that accepts the dispatch as well as other properties that it needs. And then it's the one calling dispatch. So this is something that I have done and taught before. The reason that I did it was more for code splitting ability. This was an idea that I got from Dan Abramoff. So it's not necessarily a bad idea. Would I use it just to avoid use callback? Probably not. And additionally, I should mention, I'd be remiss to say, or to not say, I would be remiss if I did not say that in Remix, you really don't have situations like this very often. So, I mean, if you want to, I realize not everybody can migrate their apps to Remix right away, but like seriously, folks, if you haven't looked into it yet, look into it. Okay, Ramsey. I recently got my first job and my task is adding React to an old Rails app. In the app, all of the global state is set in the cookies. So anywhere in the app that we're using client-side JavaScript, the code accesses the cookies to see the current user settings. So they're not HTTP only. It seems like this isn't a common pattern. So I'm wondering what you think are the drawbacks to handling global state like this. Like, why do we wrap our app in a provider and call use context everywhere instead of just calling cookies get everywhere? Okay. So you can totally do this, what you're doing, and that's fine. I would say that there are a couple of reasons why people don't do this very often. One is a lot of React apps are 100% client side and don't really have a backend that's setting cookies. So maybe they're interacting with third-party APIs and stuff. And that's just not the integration point for those apps. Another thing, or another problem with this is if you're relying on cookies for all of the user settings, a cookie is going to be sent with every request, which adds weight to the request. So that's just a reason to not make a cookie get too big. And so putting a bunch of user settings in there can be a problem. Typically, I mean, this isn't always the case. Like you can put a theme in there and stuff like that. If you don't have a lot of stuff, it's not a big deal. But typically, I just put the user ID in the cookie, and then the backend can do stuff with that. So I wouldn't typically put user settings in a cookie. Yeah. So another reason why you might not want to do user settings in a cookie, though, is you cannot subscribe to updates to the cookie. at least not easily. You have to wire something up yourself. And so you'd have to say, like, on every request that I make, if they change the cookie, now go re-render my app so that all of the places that are saying cookies get can have the latest values. And so, yeah, and you have to re-render it from the top down because you have no way to track who's using the cookies. And so that's another reason why using context would actually be better, is because yeah, you either have to identify or check every single response and say, did they set the cookie? If they did, re-render the entire app, or you just have to do a full page refresh when that happens. So not a great, those aren't great options. So it's that I think is why putting things into context is more common. Here, and I'm going to say answering this now, just because I don't know if people realize when I finally do answer their questions. So yeah, I would probably not do things this way. Yeah, what I would probably do, even with the, like, if you have the old Rails app and it's setting cookies and stuff, I would probably still put those cookie values into state, into context, into state, so that you can have specific context providers, so that those context providers can trigger updates to the specific components that are consuming those values. If those things ever change. Now, like, maybe those preferences don't change, or when they do change, you're okay with a full page refresh. Then yeah, okay, that's fine. But I don't think I'm okay with a full page refresh as a user. So that's probably what I would suggest. And also, again, with Remix, you don't have this problem. So, and you can totally use Remix with an old Rails backend. That totally works, and it works great. So take a look at that. Yeah. So yeah, I guess I'll just mention as well that Remix, Remix can be the one responsible for setting cookies, and you can server render with the cookie value, which is pretty sweet. You cannot server render a React app very easily with if Rails is responsible for your rendering, then you cannot server render and rehydrate the same stuff with the same components. So that's another idea. Just turn your Rails app into your REST backend and do all of your UI with Remix, and you will be really well off. Okay, Benjamin, I'm going to purchase testing JavaScript to improve in that area. I'm literally nowhere. Perfect. That's testing JavaScript assumes that you're literally nowhere. So that works out. Is it up to date with today's tools? Any pointers, complementary information to add? Great question. Answering this now. So great, congratulations on your purchase of testing JavaScript. It will make you a better tester. Is it up to date? Yes. So there are some tools that have made breaking changes. The most notable of these is Husky. Made a very significant change to the way that it handles Git hooks. Luckily, we have like literally 2 videos about Husky. So there's not a lot that you're going to run into with regard to problems with that. You just look at the changelog and adjust what you do if you decide to have commit hooks at all. Yeah, so as far as other tools, there may be a couple of breaking changes, but what really matters, or what you're really getting out of testing JavaScript, is the principles of testing that you're going to carry throughout your life. Tools are always going to be changing, even after you go through the testing JavaScript stuff, and that's not the real value that you get out of testing JavaScript or Epic React for that matter. It's the principles that you learn. And so I can say that the principles and practices that I teach you are still best practices and recommended. I updated it last in at the end of 2020. I think that's when I last updated it, or at least it was updated for 2020. I think is the last update. No, it was 2020. Pretty sure it was 2020. Anyway, and the tools and best practices have by and large been unchanged since then. So you are getting the latest and greatest stuff from testing JavaScript. I feel like there was something else I was going to say about that, but I think that's it. Epic React also has some testing content as well. But testing JavaScript really assumes you have no knowledge of testing and also shows you configuring tools and stuff too. Okay, hi Darius, how are you? At the moment, Remix does like 4 renders of route components after an action. I don't think this is the biggest problem for a lot of use cases unless you have super heavy tree, but do you know why that is? And is that something that can be addressed in the future? Yes, I know why that is. No, it will not be addressed in the future because it's intentional. And you can see what's going on with it. Actually, here, let's see. Let me see if I can get this running and I can show you what's going on. So we go localhost. Don't look too closely. No, just kidding. You could look closely. It's fine. So if I go into the root, this component's going to be re-rendered for every transition. I'm going to say use transition. I hate that. There we go. So use transition is a hook that tells you when transitions happen. And so if I go to sign up, we're getting a bunch of state changes. If I, here, actually, yeah, we want to go to sign up. Let's close that out. We'll say Cody at remix.run and let's see, create account, bad request. Oh, I'm in the middle of changing something. Confused though. Errors didn't have anything. Interesting. Okay, yeah, I made a bug. I screwed something up. But you'll notice that when I hit create account, we went from idle to submitting to loading to idle. So what happens when you make any mutation in Remix? Here, let's do that again. Let's clear all this stuff out. Hit create account. So we start an idle, and then we're submitting, and that's this request, and then we're loading. That's this request, and both of these requests. And then when those are done, we're idle. And so you wouldn't be worrying about this if you were the one in charge of state updates when things happen, because you can see those state updates. But then you're like, what the heck? When Remix is managing all that for you, you look at the component, you're like, man, it re-rendered like 4 times. What's going on? Well, Remix is managing these loading states for you. And it's very likely that at some point you're going to want to have access to those loading states so you can show the user some feedback from what they did in your app. And so we can see and observe what's going on. So we get an idle state, then we get a submitting state, so we can show the spinner. We can show a loading state, so we can say like success loading your data or something if you want to. And then we're back to an idle state. So that's what's going on. Will it be addressed? No, because it's like intentional. But yeah, so there you go. Now you know the answer, because yeah, people bring this up all the time, and I'm like, okay, so all of a sudden, because Remix is managing loading states for you, you're worried about re-render. People worry about re-renders too much. Stop worrying about re-renders, folks. It is not your bottleneck. I promise you. Show me your website and I will show you your bottleneck without looking at your code. And I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll go to the network tab, I'll hit refresh, and we'll look at the waterfall. Almost every app has a waterfall problem. You will improve the user experience way more by focusing on your network tab than by any amount of re-render optimization. Now, I realize this is a bit of a rant, and I'm not ranting at you, Darius. You know what you're talking about. But there are certainly situations where re-renders are a problem, and Redux really made this a problem for a lot of people. Hook up a Redux to your form and whatever, and yeah, totally get it. But like, check this out. I click this, I make some typing changes, I stop, not a single re-render, and nobody's talking about that. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, your app is way faster because you're using Remix. So don't worry about re-renders. Okay, hi, Peter. Sometimes I can get ranty, sorry. Okay, asking this in the Remix Discord, but just in case it topic is fresh on your mind, let me go refresh or take a look at what this is. Okay. Any Git diffs for converting suspense to Remix? Let me just get some more context. Yeah, I don't know if there are. So if we go to the blog, Ryan wrote this, and I'm guessing he has source. Yep. So if we go look at the, yeah, this probably wasn't a migration. It was probably a complete rewrite. So if we look at the, oh wait, that's the live demo. This, if we look at the commit history, oh wait, no, it looks like it was, yeah, remix, boom, there you go. There's your commit, rewriting suspense to remix. So there you go. That is your answer. Let's come back here and click on this and say, yep, here you go. Okay, cool. So there you go. Let me see if you have any other comments. And I'll paste this here too, so people don't have to look for that. Okay. Yeah, if you'll need more background watching on YouTube with some delay, I am learning Remix and I have a waterfall of slow API. So I want to server render only the critical path and lazy load the rest of the data. I know how I would do it in CSR, client-side rendering, and how I would approach the problem with server-side components, but I don't have a good mental model how to approach the problem with nested routes or whatever Remix answer is. If the answer is it depends, here's my prototype code. Just a use effect without exhaustive depths, no production quality, blah, blah, blah. I would like to remixify. Okay, so this is what you got. You have this load function, fetch the questions, and then JSONify it, and then set those questions and combine them with the existing question, the current questions. Okay, so yeah, so and you're doing this on initial page load. Yeah. Oh, and you're doing it on, for all the questions, if there's not a page ID, then you do it on the next tick, I guess. I'm sure there's interesting, oh, and this is in a Remix app. Okay. Okay, so you're in the process of remixifying this, and this is in your root. Okay. And so, yeah, you've got your initial questions coming from the loader, and then on the client, you load some more. Okay, so, and the reason that you're doing this is because you have slow APIs. Okay, so the answer to slow APIs is first try to make the APIs faster. If you can't make them faster because they're third party or something, like I've got an example of a slow API that I can't make faster. And that is, nope, not the calls podcast. It's the Chats with Kent podcast. Actually, it's the calls too, probably. But the API for getting information from the Simplecast API for this podcast is really slow. That API is super slow. So what I do is I cache it. I've got a Redis cache in front of this. And so I hit the API, I convert it to all the data structure that I need, stick it into a Redis cache. And then the next time I need to go get it, I check the Redis cache first. If it's in there, then I just grab it and check if it's been expired. And if it has, I go and say, hey, go refresh it. But then I send the cache data. So the cache is always fast. Like even if it's expired, the user, I'd rather give the user something that's fast and expired than making the user wait. It's like sort of a stale while revalidate, except there's no time where I say, hey, if it's this old, then make it slow. Like don't ever show somebody this old. That's the last thing of stale while revalidate that I haven't implemented in my cache. And maybe one day I'll implement that. I don't know. But anyway, sometimes caching isn't really an option either because you never want to show something stale. There are not a lot of cases like that, I think. But those do exist. So caching may not be an option for that reason. Another situation where caching might not be an option is if there's just so much data that it doesn't make sense to cache, like, or it's a computation that's happening. And so you can't cache the computation because it's like different every time or something. Maybe what the weather is tomorrow. You can't, or like what the weather is in 5 minutes or something like that. You can't really cache that because it's changing every second, whatever. So it doesn't make sense to cache. So there are some situations where you can't speed it up. Caching isn't really an option. And so what you do in those situations is exactly what you're doing. You you make sure you basically you want to almost always make sure that your loader runs fast, so that page transitions are fast and your initial load is fast and all of that. And so, yeah, if you've got an API that you're hitting that's slow, then doing a fetch to what I'm guessing is a resource route. Whoops. So you've got your questions thing here. Yeah, it's a resource route here. Is the right way to go about it. As far as like, is this the right way to do this? Because this is Remix, when I first looked at this, I thought this was still a client-side render thing. So because this is Remix, you actually don't need to do this fetch yourself. You would actually be better off to use Remix's built-in use fetcher. And use fetcher allows you to do a fetch to a route without having to, without having to manage these loading states and all of this stuff for you. So that's what I would recommend. Use fetcher, and otherwise this looks good to me. So good job. Cool. So those are the things. Make the API faster, cache it, or fetch it on the client, and so that you can show a loading state. Those are your options. Okay, yeah. Turns out React is fast. Yes, it is. Like people, this is the funniest thing. Like people will say, "Oh, but look, I can render in like 5 milliseconds faster, or maybe even 20 milliseconds faster." But then you look at the network tab and you're like, yeah, but it takes like 3 seconds to load your app. So who the heck cares if you can render even 100 milliseconds faster? If you can't load your app in like 100 milliseconds, it's a fraction. Update your backend stuff so that it doesn't take so long. React is not your bottleneck. And then if it's on updates or something, like, oh yeah, look, I can do updates and it's not re-rendering a million times. Great, awesome. Is re-rendering your bottleneck? Well, no, so who cares? So yeah, anyway, like, yes, it's technically faster, but look at the user experience. And is it better? It's 6s, so who cares? It doesn't matter. Okay, what's your and sometimes maybe it does. Like don't get me wrong, there may be some use cases where it totally matters, but most of us who are complaining about it, talking about it, like it doesn't really matter. And yes, we are going to support Preact in the future. And Preact is faster and smaller and whatever in some cases, but yeah, it's so funny. Yeah, let me just answer this really quick, then I'll get back to this. Use fetcher is a hook, not possible in a loop. Thanks for the tips. Oh, okay. Yeah, so it is a hook. And so yeah, it is not possible to use in a loop. And I don't think that you are loop. Oh yeah, so you do have this for each. Yeah, so you could just render components that individually are yeah, so this might be a little bit tricky depending on what you need. But what you could do, and maybe you're happy with what you have. If you're happy with what you have, that's fine. Just keep in mind that like there are no loading states or any of that stuff is managed for you. Form resubmissions, race conditions, all of that stuff goes away if you don't use fetcher. If those things don't matter to you, then that's fine. I would strongly advise using use fetcher. But you're right, because it's a hook, you cannot use it in a loop. But what you can do is, here, actually, I wanted to use fetchers. What you can do is render a loop of components, and each one of those is going to render use fetcher or use fetcher. And then you can actually use this use fetchers component to kind of gather them all up into one place. So you can get the state of all of them in a single place. And so you can, yeah, use fetcher combines all of the fetchers that are on the page at the same time. So that would be an option for you. Just render the loop declaratively in your markup. Say like, here's the question ID or whatever. Use fetcher is used inside of those, and then use fetchers is in the parent, putting it all together. And then you have access to all of the loading states and everything. So that's what I would recommend looking into, so that all can be managed for you. Okay, Mukul, you can correct me. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. What does Today I learned use factor. Yeah, most people don't know. It's a pretty advanced use case. Okay, what is your take on React Query? I'm working with React for the past 7 to 8 months. These days, I'm trying different React libraries. Super confused between Context, Redux, and React Query. Here's what I would say. You're at the right time to start doing React because Remix exists. Use Remix. You don't need Redux. You don't need React Query. And most of the time, you don't even need context. Remix is using context, but you don't need to use it yourself. Use Remix, and so many of the problems that people are facing with React will not be a problem for you. So that's what I would say. Good luck. As far as my take on React Query, if you're not using Remix, you should be using React Query. Yeah, I do not recommend Redux, but React Query is great for client rendered apps. Yeah, apps that are not using Remix. React Query is awesome. Okay, that's all the questions that I've got. Anybody? I noticed we've got a few new friends in Zoom. So anybody in Zoom have a question? Okay, cool. Then I will start wrapping up. Thanks everybody for coming. This has been fun. Yeah, use Remix. It's awesome. And yeah, office hours. Let's see. I don't think I have a cancellation. What is it? Next week is May 18th and nothing on my calendar. So I should be here next week. So look forward to that. Feel free to fill this Discord channel up with more questions. I'll wait here for a second for Mateo to finish typing before I sign off. Benjamin, I noticed you were connecting to audio for a second. Do you have a question?
If I may, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just bumping on the question regarding use context versus the cookies, because I'm implementing something with the cart system, a basket system for keeping track of all the products a client will select, and I'm using it as a cookie. And so when I add a new information in this cart, it will reload the whole page with all the information related to that page. And so just because I'm committing in my action, I'm just committing the cookie in the headers. And so it launched again the loader, and I see two solutions: using Redis and just live with that, or use the unstable should reload to make sure that for some action I don't reload the whole page. And I don't know if you have. I can show you a quick example if you want. But
yeah, so let me make sure I understand the concern. So you're worried that when the user like increments the quantity or something, it's triggering all of the loaders on the page to rerun, and you don't necessarily want that to happen. Mm-hmm. And is the reason for that is yeah, what's your concern with reloading loaders unnecessarily?
Well, it's just that it will hit the database quite a lot compared to the action that is done. Actually, just incrementing the cookie by one is.
I see. Yeah. So it just seems unnecessary. Yeah. And at scale, it could be problematic. Yeah. So my first question would be, are you at a scale, or do you foresee being at a scale where this could be like an actual problem? So the question is this just suboptimal? And it just like kind of rubs you the wrong way? Or is it actually probably going to be a problem for you?
I think it could be a problem in the future. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's always good to like, let's first establish pre-optimization and stuff like that. Yeah. So yeah, it absolutely, I can see how it could be a problem. So this is precisely what the unstable should reload, or whatever that API is called, is for. So that's probably what I would do. The cool thing about that API is that I've actually never used it, so I need to like build something with it. But from the way that I understand it, rather than having that like check for everything that could possibly happen and say, no, I don't want it for that. No, I don't want it for this. You actually just say what you do want it for, what you do want a reload to happen for. And so you can just put it right next to your loader and say, here are the things that my loader is using. And here are the situations where it makes sense to reload for the data. In some ways, it's actually very similar to React.memo in that way. So yeah, I think the use case is 100%. We will support this in the future. The unstable prefix is because we're not sure this is the way we want to support it. So you're totally safe to use it. You just have to be aware or keep an eye on the release notes to make sure we don't break you in the future. So that's probably what I would do if I were in your position, is use that API.
Good, thanks.
Yeah. Now, like you could like, I don't know. What I would actually do is I would try it that way, and then I also look into the amount of effort it would take to cache the database calls, and then just compare the two options, be like, which one I hate the least.
Well,
so
because a product can be put as unavailable, and so refreshing the page would be an advantage because I would get that new information. So that could be interesting, but then indeed I would use Redis to just make sure that in the middle I don't refresh that much on the database when nothing changes. So
yeah. So like if you have some sort of webhook into when a product gets updated so that you can update the cache intelligently,
okay, that's
then that that would be that's what I do on my blog. Is I have GitHub actions that run when I commit, so I know when a change happens, and I go and intelligently update the cache. And then of course you can have like an expiration thing, so it updates, on the regular. But yeah, you're I should have mentioned this. It is actually good that you get a refresh of the data so that the user can see like when things have changed. Especially when you've got like, oh, there are only 4 products left, and so the user's like, oh sweet, I want all of them, and then they find out that actually somebody bought one already. So it definitely has use case or user implications, user experience implications. So it would be a better user experience to cache it. But yeah, like I said, there's nothing wrong with using the other API as well. You should be safe there.
That way. Yeah. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Any other questions? All right. I think we're wrapping up. Thanks, everybody. This is fun. Hope you have a marvelous day. Super exciting stuff happening on Monday. So keep a sharp eye on the Remix Conf page, because we've got some, we're announcing speakers on Monday, and I am so excited. It's going to be sick. So we've got a couple of speakers initially that we announced, but yeah, we're going to announce the rest of the speakers. The whole schedule is going to be announced as well. So really, really cool stuff. So look forward to that. And then we've got a really awesome feature coming to Remix on Tuesday, most likely. So 2 exciting Remix things happening next week. So keep an eye out on that. Oh my gosh, I was just sharing my screen and or doing stuff on my screen and not actually sharing. So go to remix.run/conf and